All right, today we're going to trace a really dark line through American history. It's a line that connects a once celebrated quote-unquote science of human improvement to the very real, very deep wounds people feel today inside our modern systems of care.
Just let that sink in. I feel like I've spent my whole life trying to convince people to see my humanity. This quote from a mother who is caught up in the very system that's supposed to help is really the heart of our entire story. It's about the fight just to be seen as a person, against a system that can feel anything but humane.
And yeah, that leads us right to the big question we're tackling. How does something that starts with the idea of protection end up creating this kind of deep, lasting pain? Well, the answer, as we're about to see, has roots that go way, way deeper than you might think.
So our journey starts with an idea that, on the surface, sounded pretty progressive to a lot of people at the time. It was this promise of making a better world by making better people. This was the incredibly seductive sales pitch for eugenics.
Okay, so what is eugenics exactly? The name itself, which comes from Sir Francis Galton, literally means well-born. And the core idea was, essentially, to apply the principles of selective animal breeding to human beings. Yep. The goal was to encourage the so-called best people to have more kids and, well, to stop the unfit from having any kids at all.
But here in the United States, this idea took on a very specific flavor. It wasn't just some abstract theory for scientists to debate. It very quickly became a tool for social control. It was a way to justify and lock in the power of the dominant groups in society.
So you're probably asking, who exactly were these unfit people? Well, here's the thing. The definition wasn't really medical. It was social. This label was slapped on the poor, on people with disabilities, on those with mental illness, and, this is crucial, on specific communities of color. In the end, fitness was just code for being wealthy, white, and conforming to the norm.
An ideology is one thing, but to actually enforce it on a whole country, you need a machine. You need policies, you need laws. And this is how they took those beliefs and turned them into real, brutal actions.
And this machine, it was built piece by painful piece. It starts back in 1896, with states passing laws about who was allowed to get married. Then boom, 1907, Indiana passes the country's very first forced sterilization law. By 1924, this thinking goes federal, used to basically shut the door on immigrants from places they deemed inferior. And it took until 1967 for the Supreme Court to finally say that laws banning interracial marriage were unconstitutional.
And this table, it just lays out the hierarchy in black and white, doesn't it? The so-called superior stock was defined as Nordic, Anglo-Saxon, rich, and able-bodied. And on the other side, the inferior list, well, it was full of immigrants, Jewish people, people from Asia, and the poor. It was a crystal-clear, racialized vision for society.
And you gotta understand, this wasn't some fringe movement happening in the shadows. This went all the way to the top. In 1927, the Supreme Court of the United States itself gave a green light to forced sterilization. They essentially declared that it was perfectly constitutional to stop certain people from having a family.
So how do you get the general public to go along with such a harsh agenda? You don't just quietly pass laws, you have to create a whole culture around it. You have to turn it into a spectacle.
And that is exactly what they did. The leaders of the eugenics movement cleverly repackaged their whole ideology into something that looked wholesome and family-friendly. Competitions at state fairs all across America.
So, on the surface, these things were called Better Baby and Fitter Families contests. It was all framed as being about public health, about teaching people how to raise healthy kids. But in reality, just beneath that shiny surface, it was a system designed to push the exact same class and racial hierarchies we've been talking about.
And this right here really shows you the two faces of the whole movement. It's jarring. On one side, you have the public show, prizes and blue ribbons for white middle-class families. But on the other, you have the hidden cost for anyone labeled unfit, a life of being locked away in institutions, having the basic right to have a family stolen from them by force.
And that brings us to today. The actual word eugenics has thankfully fallen out of favor, but its ghost, that underlying logic, it still haunts us. And we can see how this history plays out in people's lives today through a concept called moral injury. Just take a second and really let this statistic land. Young people who have been through the foster care system, a system created for their welfare, are twice as likely to have PTSD in their adult lives as military veterans who have seen combat.
This just forces you to ask a really heavy question. What is going on inside this system that causes trauma on the same scale as a war? A big part of the answer might be this concept, moral injury. Now, it's different from PTSD. PTSD is often rooted in fear. Moral injury is a wound to your soul, to your conscience. It's what happens when you're forced to do, or even just witness something that shatters your own sense of right and wrong.
And in what many critics now call the family policing system, this injury hits everyone involved. Children feel betrayed by the very adults and systems that were supposed to keep them safe. Parents are shamed and made to feel powerless. And even the caseworkers and service providers, they suffer too, often forced to enforce rules that they know are actually hurting the families they're supposed to be helping.
These words from a mother just capture that feeling perfectly. That deep sense of powerlessness, the feeling that you have to betray your own sense of what's right just to survive. You have to accept something that feels deeply wrong. That is moral injury.
And here it is. This is the final, absolutely chilling connection. The argument is that the modern system's focus on regulating and criminalizing poor families, especially families of color, is not an accident. It's a direct echo of the eugenics movement's original mission to manage and control the very same populations they deemed unfit 100 years ago.
So we have to end with this really difficult question. If the pain and the trauma that this system causes aren't just an unfortunate side effect, if they are actually part of its design, inherited from this century-old ideology, then what does it even mean to try and fix it? What could a path forward possibly look like?